For those of you who often get confused about the generations and the titles and labels we attach to them, Generation Z, colloquially known as Zoomers, is the demographic cohort succeeding millennials, preceding Generation Alpha. Researchers and popular media use the mid to late 1990s as starting birth years and the early 2010 as the ending birth years for Generation Z. We have two members of Generation Z, leaders. And I know when we talk with this age group, we like to say future leaders, but I can tell our participants very clearly that the two young people that are here today to speak to you about this topic, so very vital to the health of America, they are already leaders. Our first speaker is Nancy Davidson. Nancy is currently completing her freshman year at Rowan College of South Jersey and is a computer graphic arts print design major, also working towards a certificate in digital marketing. Nancy is a class of 2022 graduate of Pittman High School. And when finished at Rowan College of South Jersey, she looks to continue her education at James Madison University through their Media Art and Design and Sports Communications program. Nancy is a member of 3 academic honor societies here on campus and is also a proud member of the Rowan College of South Jersey Gloucester's women's golf team. Nancy, you're on. And again, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. So, hi, I'm Nancy Davidson. So you got a nice little background about myself there, but something that wasn't mentioned is I also actually work at RCSJ in the advisement department. So in addition to being a student and seeing what our students go through every day, I also am seeing a lot more students because every student that goes to our college has to come to my office and get their classes scheduled. So I basically see almost every student who is on our campus. So I feel like I'm kind of uniquely positioned to maybe talk about, some of the stressors that are facing a lot of our students, because I have to help them schedule their classes and schedule around them. So a lot of students who come in when they're trying to work out their schedules may not have time to be a full-time student and are a lot of the time scheduling around other things in their life, such as they might have kids, they might have to schedule around work, they might have to take care of their siblings. Everybody's in very unique positions, and something that definitely impacted that a lot, I believe, is COVID, because COVID really impacted, at least I feel, our generation's responsibility level a lot. Because a lot of the times when, kids in my generation were at home doing online school, they would be in charge of taking care of their siblings or keeping the house kind of going while their parents might still have had to have been at work, or they might even have still had to go into work during COVID, depending on what their job was. So our generation has taken on a lot of responsibility that I feel like sometimes goes overlooked. And, that's kind of leads into my next point a bit. Our generation holds a lot of responsibilities, and sometimes it's very easy to kind of overlook it in the sense of, well, that person might maybe have everything together. They're working a job, they're involved in clubs, they're involved in sports, they're doing well in school. And, people can kind of slip through the cracks sometimes with that because, it might maybe be easier sometime. I don't want to say easier, but it might maybe be a little bit easier to tell when someone's struggling, if their grades start slipping or if they start to withdraw a little bit. And, just because someone seems like they have it all together doesn't necessarily mean that they do. And a lot of the times, students who tend to be performing at really high levels, they're in honors classes, AP classes, or, they have a 4.0 GPA, or they're involved in all these different programs. Everybody has their own stuff going on that nobody really knows a lot about. And it's very important that you make sure you check in on those kids as well, not just the ones who like you can maybe tell are struggling a little bit more. And something that I think is really great about our generation is that mental health feels like, at least to me and, the social circles I've been in, mental health seems like a relatively normal topic amongst at least me and my friends. And people my age, I feel like, tend to talk about it a lot more openly than, some others. And I think that's very good, but it also makes it very hard sometimes for people in our generation to open up to people who are older about, our experiences with mental health, because we might feel like it might not be received as well, or it might automatically have a negative label to it, which it shouldn't. And it generally doesn't. I mean, I'm sure me and Jax could sit here and have a conversation for, hours about, our thoughts and feelings on mental health. But when it comes to maybe talking to a doctor about it, or talking to your parents about it, or your grandparents, it might be a little bit more of a harder conversation to have. So it's something that I think is very important, is making sure that, you're being patient, you're being kind with these people who are trying to open up, because it can be really hard for them sometimes. And they might not necessarily come from, an environment where that's a normal thing for them to talk about. They might be able to talk about it with their friends, but they might not maybe talk about it a lot with adults, or feel weird talking about it to adults. And, I've been so blessed in that my family mental health is a very, open topic. My mom's a guidance counselor. My dad's a teacher. He's a coach. We've always been very transparent about it, but that's something that I know a lot of people don't get. So it's very important that if someone that is in our generation comes to you and is trying to talk to you about mental health, that you're receptive, you listen, and you understand that this wasn't something that they came to you to talk to about lightly. It's something that, they really feel that they trust you and want your help, Something else I think is very important too, is that we all know mental health doesn't have a one size fits all treatment. One thing that might work for me isn't necessarily going to work for Jax. Something that works for Jax isn't maybe going to work for me. So it's a long process of trying to figure out what works, for you. And you have to just be, again, patient with it. And, conventional treatment might work sometimes, more unconventional treatment might work. It's all up to, the person, what their lifestyle is, and just how different things affect them. So, yeah, I think that's all I had.
And Nancy, thank you very much. And the reality is today, and it's so tragic, but 1 in 4 teens are now diagnosed with a mental health disorder. And I think your point about, never assume that a young person's, even if they don't appear outwardly to be exhibiting concerning signs, never just assume they're okay. Always check in. I mean, it's become, again, tragically, such a commonality in our society today, especially for young people. So thank you very much for sharing your wisdom. We really appreciate it. And hold on, hopefully we'll get some questions coming in, either the Q&A or the chat, and that'll be the second part of our program. So now I'd love to introduce another leader. Jaxson Pierce Dunn was born and raised throughout various places in New Jersey. Jackson's father, John Paul, and mother, Catherine, had their fair share of struggles, yet their constant effort provided Jaxson with every lesson he needed to learn until now. Jaxson has spent many years moving to different towns and schools and ultimately graduated from Washington Township High School. And for those of you that are out of state, that is in southern New Jersey. He is now attending Rowan College of South Jersey. As I said, he just completed his freshman year. And he's also serving as a position among the executives of the student government on campus. Jax, great to be here. Very happy you're here with us, and we'd love to hear from you.
All right, well, thank you for having me, James. Hello, everyone. As you just heard, my name is Jaxson Dunn, and I want to thank you guys for taking your time out of your day to be here. I've been given the opportunity to discuss topics concerning mental health and stability among my peers, which I feel is a really important topic, especially in the times that we're going through today. In preparation for this event, I spent a lot of time around my community talking to peers and administrators about their views on mental health in our generation. As it was previously stated by James, I am on a position in the student government, which gives me a lot of opportunity to go around campus, getting a real idea of what the life is like around campus. You know, how kids are feeling every day when they come into school, how teachers are feeling every day when they come into school, administrators, everybody. And as a result, I feel it's a self-evident truth that one's thoughts and emotions affect the way that they act and treat others as well as themselves. I can see clearly while surveying my own community, from the relationships between my peers to that of the administrators and professors that work with us. Even more so, I can see this in myself when I reflect on what I have been thinking and feeling. You know, depending on what I think and feel, it has a clear, effect on the outcome of what I end up doing with, my life. It affects my lifestyle and all the relationships in my life. To divulge on my experiences a bit further, I can chart large fluctuations in my mental health back to COVID-19, the pandemic started. As I believe many people my age, in my generation, can. COVID was a sensitive time for me and many others in the world. Everyone really was harshly affected by it. But for my age group specifically, it seemed to rip a large hole in a big transitionary period for my generation. A large time for growth and crucial years of high school were interrupted by a large break from everything. And, it kind of had a really negative effect when it comes to our capacity for social interaction, for speaking with one another. My generation already has the tendency to rely heavily on devices and technology such as social media and video games. We create these bad habits over our childhood because it's just technology that's implemented into our youth. But a time like COVID really accentuated the bad habits and addictions that we had developed over our childhood years. For me, personally, I already had a plethora of bad habits and hurtful coping mechanisms that I developed from prior traumatic experiences. But the pandemic itself accentuated these about tenfold. I believe that a combination of the fundamental tendency to use technology as a form of escape and the isolation caused by the pandemic put me personally in a desperately bad mental state where I felt alone at every capacity. Coming out of the pandemic, when graduating high school, I was exposed to the feeling that it was sort of an empty experience. You were told that when you were graduating high school, you would be prepared to take on the next step of life, whether that be college or technical school or any form of furthering education or job life. Though I feel that me and a lot of people in my generation around my age group shared that emotion, that it was more of an empty experience that didn't provide them what they felt, they needed to be provided with. Only in the most recent months in college have I been able to properly exert my energy into nourishing and educative activities, as well as positive social interaction, which I believe has revealed a lot about the current situation regarding mental health at this stage in life. I know that there are many people around my age like me that feel jaded as a result of a lackluster experience, especially throughout the most recent of years. There are those who feel overwhelmed and dejected at the same time, with a minimal source of outreach and positive social interaction to help them. I worry that many of us today are struggling with the process of speaking out for themselves and even wanting to make changes on how they approach caring for their mental health. Climactically, I believe that the compounding reason for the cross-generational lack of communication about this crucial topic is driven solely by fear and anxiety. A general lack of emotional trust has formed between my generation of young students and any older generation before them. I know for me personally, the fear of allowing myself to be vulnerable and judged has kept me from acknowledging and then handling major issues in my life that continued to hurt me for years. And while my parents were the people who I feel I could always imagine myself reaching out to for help, I found that I was far too afraid of what they would think or how they would respond to do so. This is a tendency that I worry that not only many of my peers that are my age can relate to, but many people can relate to in general. The fear or concern of how someone else will respond to, you coming out about your own mental health or how you feel about a situation will put you in a sort of ditch, to metaphorical ditch, where, you're kind of stuck in a purgatory sense. The truth is that we're all very vulnerable and fragile. More so recently, after overcoming such a devastating global event, however, this makes me feel that it's become even more important to acknowledge the importance of taking time to listen to one another. The beauty of our human nature has always been our ability to understand and empathize with each other based on our awareness of different situations. At a time where division and lack of community can be felt, and people my age are going through major transitional phases in which they surely need guidance, I feel it is more important than ever to generate a strong community with bonds that can act as pillars of support that I know we all need. I don't think anyone can make it through life alone. And after my first year in college and the student government, it has shown me what it looks like when people come together all in hopes to forge a community with better education, interpersonal relationships, and overall quality of life. And more importantly, it showed me that just how possible it is, but only if, everyone in a community makes strides to work towards it. This is my first time speaking about the critical issue of mental health, but I feel it's through conversations like these that we will prompt the evolution of how we care for ourselves and one another. I hope this will act as a call to never be afraid to speak and listen when it comes to you or anyone's mental health, as our strength comes from each other and we can endure anything as long as we support one another. Thank you for allowing me my time to speak, James.
And Jax, thank you very much. And Rowan College of South Jersey is lucky to have you as a student leader there. And thank you for speaking to us about something that we know is near and dear to you. Rowan College has been just a fantastic partner to Ascend to Integrated Health. And in getting to know Dr. Keating and his staff, I know that there is no bigger priority than his students' mental health. And the way we can improve mental health, the way we can get people more open and talking about it so we can identify when people need help and maybe find pathways to help and pathways to recovery in many ways is, if we could multiply you and Nancy by 1 million and spread you around college campuses across the universe. But seriously, thank you. And thank you for your leadership. We need so many more young people, so many more Gen Zers to be able to talk about this subject and talk about it as you talk about it. It's a first step talking about it, but it's a very necessary step. So our next panelist is Dr. Gregory Bunt. Dr. Bunt is the past president of the New York Society of Addiction Medicine. He's the past president of the International Society of Addiction Medicine and past president of the American Society of Adolescent Psychiatry. He has authored over 20 publications and speaks nationally and internationally about addiction medicine and addiction psychiatry. Dr. Bunt is also a clinical assistant professor of psychiatry at the NYU School of Medicine. Dr. Bunt, thank you so much for being here with us, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Jim, for the opportunity to speak about this critically important topic. And first, I want to congratulate both Nancy and Jaxson for a very impressive and articulate explanation and description of what you went through. And it's so meaningful. I also want to add that, Jaxson, you mentioned interpersonal relationships and social relationships are so important to mental health, and that is true. And by both of you coming out and speaking about this, you do several things to your peers. First of all, you give them comfort in identifying themselves mental health, because there is a stigma and sometimes an embarrassment or shame about admitting to mental health problems. But your courage and your ability to speak out so effectively influences your peers, and that's a very important part of their mental health. So already by doing this, you're helping your peers who may be struggling with a mental health problem. And you also serve as role models for them, demonstrating that you can get through this, that treatment works, and that you can be very, very successful. And it's a matter of time and effort to get through any particular mental health challenge or struggle. So again, I congratulate both of you, and you're really serving as role models in this area. And that's a very important part of mental health for your peers. I want to just start by explaining that the scope and magnitude of the mental health problem among adolescents and children really is of a crisis proportion. As Jim said, and it's estimated about 1 in 4, 25% of children and adolescents will go through some significant mental health challenge or disorder during their lifetime. The mental health crisis was a problem identified before the pandemic, before COVID, but then it really has exacerbated dramatically because of the COVID stressors, the impact of COVID on the schooling and the social interactions. Also, the electronic age with the various influences of the internet, also, even before the pandemic, has caused some stress and confusion for a lot of adolescents, and that's contributed to the mental health crisis. With regard to the internet itself is a vehicle for several types of adverse types of activities, whether it be gaming or gambling or addictive relationships. But that is a factor that's contributed to our mental health crisis. Among the mental health disorders, in general, there are the mood disorders, like depression and cyclical mood, anxiety disorders, and so many adolescents struggle with them, including PTSD. Some of them have had traumatic experiences. The addictive disorders, including substance and also behavioral addictions, like the ones I mentioned connected with the internet. There are cognitive disorders like autism and attention deficit. And then there are the range of interpersonal developmental delays and setbacks in cognition and social skills that accompany mental health disorders or challenges. I think it's important to understand, and Nancy touched on this, that mental health can be very complicated and it's different for different people. And there are usually 4 different dimensions of mental health that can impact heavily on development and also the development of mental health disorders. Those dimensions are the biopsychosocial and spiritual or philosophical. So biologically, there's the brain chemistry, which is impacted by lifestyle and nutrition and genetics. There is the psychological dimension, including attitudes, behaviors, perceptions, decision-making that's impacted by peers and teachers and family. There's the social dimension, the family dynamic, the peers, the community, which is often insufficient. Community services often are insufficient in providing for the needs of those adolescents or children suffering or challenged with mental health disorders. And then there's the spiritual, philosophical, the belief system, the values, the meaning in their lives, their relationship to others and their world. And so that's why these 4 dimensions need to be understood in relation to each and every adolescent or child who's going through a mental health challenge or disorder. Finally, there's the assessment, which is important for all those struggling with a mental health disorder. Can you get the right assessment? And professional assessment is always the best option. Sometimes that in itself can be difficult and a struggle, getting the right professional to assess the problem, in some cases make a diagnosis, in some cases individual, as Nancy was saying, there's no one size fits all in terms of mental health treatment. It's very individual, very different for different people and different individuals, different adolescents. As I said, there are all these different dimensions with the different variables. And so some may need and benefit from more advanced professional help, like a psychologist or a psychiatrist who might need to prescribe medication for these various disorders. And accessing treatment can be a real problem for some individuals and families. And that we can talk about further in the question and answer period. But that kind of sums up my presentation, Jim, so I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Bunt. And as the questions come in, we will pose them. The first thing I want to address is to the participants who are wondering if this presentation is being recorded and will be available. The answer is yes. I apologize. I know some of you got booted off and we had some technical difficulties, but the webinar in its entirety will be available in a few days on the Ascenda Integrated Health website, specifically the Ascenda Institute of Health Innovation website, and it will be available for your view. And thank you for your patience to all our participants. And thank you to our panelists. We're going to shift to the question and answer period of it. So I am going to ask this question that came in to Nancy. What can parents do to support their young adults? As a parent of a college student, I try to give independence, but I also want to provide support and let my child know I am there for them. It's a tough balance. Do you have any suggestions?
I would say, yes, it is a very hard balance to find. I know I've been very grateful in that, I'm generally am a very independent person. I'm an only child. I've just kind of grown up that way. But something that, is very beneficial for me is that I know with all of the independence I have, I know that I can go back to my parents and talk to them about it because they've made an open space to talk about it, in the sense of, if I went up to my dad and told him that I, was struggling, feeling that I was really overwhelmed, really stressed out, he doesn't, necessarily say right back to me, oh, well, it's because of this, this, and this, you got to do this. It's more about making sure that you listen and making sure that you're not coming you're not coming from a judgmental place, even though you're not coming from a judgmental place. Make sure that it doesn't sound like you're coming off from a judgmental place. Just listen, ask, okay, do you need anything from me? How can I help you? And, that I feel like is very important in the sense too, of that sometimes we're not always necessarily, if we're coming to someone with a problem, we're not necessarily asking for a solution. We're just asking for someone to listen and empathize with us. So I think that's definitely very important.
And thank you, Nancy. And, just to kind of echo what you said, I think for youth especially, but for all of us, it's so very important to be connected, but to feel like we're being heard. And I know sometimes there are no easy answers. Probably most of the time when we're dealing with it, there are no easy answers. It's complicated, but you stay with it and you observe and you listen. And as you said, you let someone knows, especially your child, that you're there for them. Jax, another question has come in that I'm going to pose to you. One of our audience members said, or asked rather, do the students feel that their college does enough to support them in their mental health journey? If yes, what are some highlights? And if not, what could they work on?
Well, that's a wonderful question. I know from my experience that a large amount of the students on my campus don't feel as if the college itself is doing enough to support them properly or help them properly with their mental health. But I would like to add that there are various programs around campus, such as counseling and help from administrators for anything you might need, whether it does concern your college needs, educative needs, or if you do have any home issues that you want to bring up to them, you are fully able to. Though I will say a large divider, I'll say, between the students on our campus and any resources available to them to assist them with things like mental health. The major divider is just communication. It's not pushed out as much as students would need. It doesn't catch their eyes enough. They may receive emails every now and then that they disregard because they feel as if they won't be receiving the help that they require from these programs anyway. Though I think the only difference would have to be our campus making more of an effort to reach out to students about how they're feeling, make it more of a prominent point in the strides that we make to better our programs for reaching out to students, to listen to how they feel and make changes based on that.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you, Jaxson. And, and speaking on behalf of Rowan College and your professors and teachers and faculty, I know just by them asking and identifying you to see if you'd be willing to speak, and also promoting this event, because quite frankly, a real intended target of this webinar are your peers and our fellow students. We know we have parents, we know we have professionals, we have educators, we have therapists on the call. We have people who are really, really concerned about this issue. Again, as I would say and argue with anyone, I don't think there's another issue that we should be more concerned about in this country. I think that, as Dr. Bunt referred to, we are in epidemic phases here for mental health and specifically for youth. A question came in about, how can I let my child or loved one know that they can talk to me about their mental health struggles? And, I think Nancy answered that question. Offer to listen, validate how they are feeling, ask how you can best support them, and offer to find help if needed. Moving on with the questions. How do the students feel about the relationship between social media and mental health? Does it affect you mostly negatively or positively? So who wants to take a crack at that? Nancy, Jax? Okay, Jax, go right ahead. Social media is very, very important.
Well, social media is a large part of what affects our generation, especially because we were one of the first generations of children born with immediate access to the internet. I'd like to believe that over the past 20 years of the internet's existence, my generation specifically has formed a lot of bad coping mechanisms and addictions when it comes to social media. And it's divisive and it has its pros and cons, because while we are able to communicate more freely with social media and put what we want out there for who we want to see it, we also tend to fall into the trap of using a lot of social media to just eat up our time, really. It becomes sort of like I said before, a coping mechanism, but one that does not really do us enough justice. You get lost in a lot of the comparisons that you make between you and other people on social media. And I know it's coming from my own experience that you can waste a lot of time every single day of your life just scrolling on a screen and not really thinking about anything else going on.
Thank you very much. And to the audience, I'm sure many of you are aware of this recently within the last 2 weeks. The Surgeon General issued an advisory on social media's harmful impact on youth. Surgeon General Dr. Murthy released a health advisory warning of social media's impact on youth mental health. Very, very important. And the whole issue of social media, cyberbullying, it's all very concerning. There's a question.
Also,
Go ahead, Dr. Bunt.
there are toxic relationships and predators on social media that can affect people in adolescence. So that can be a real concern also. Nancy, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I just also wanted to say too, like Jack said, there's definitely pros and cons that comes with social media. And I think part of it is part of it has to do with your headspace of going into it too. I know like social media is, I would definitely not say it's for very young children. You can't really control what you're exposed to. It's the internet. It's going to be what it's going to be. But, I know me personally, I felt like I was maybe I was on my phone too much. I was, doing stuff like that. And I tried to come at it from a healthier standpoint. So I set up screen time on my phone. So I only have, like an hour on Instagram a day, and then it locks me out of it. And I'm not saying to go hop on your kid's phone and institute screen time on there for them, because that's might not be the answer either. But you have to make sure you know what you want out of it, and make sure that you're kind of monitoring yourself and that you don't let it get out of hand. And, it's very easy for that to sometimes slip out of hand. So you just have to make sure that you're aware of that kind of stuff.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you for that very clear, concrete example. I mean, I just think that's wonderful. I mean, it's to say, okay, I'm going to limit my screen time and do that in a very concerted way. The benefits of that, I think sometimes we underestimate. I mean, while social media and the internet provides numerous benefits and opportunities for young people, it also presents certain risks and challenges that can affect their mental well-being. So it's an important balance. And I think one of the things that I've become aware of, and I'm very happy about it, is I think a growing number of parents today are really in tune with this issue. And we need, it would be wonderful if all parents were. And I think we have to kind of continue to do more forums and formats like this to kind of get the word out. But parents have a right to be concerned. And the evidence is there to be concerned about things like cyberbullying, online harassment, exposure to inappropriate content. I mean, the list goes on and on. And the challenges go on and on. A question came in about what are some warning signs that a loved one is struggling with their mental health? I'll be happy to take that one. I would say, if there's use of substances such as alcohol, even nicotine or marijuana, are there changes in sleep or eating patterns, frequent mood swings, intense fear or worries that get in the way of daily life? Are there prolonged feelings of sadness or hopelessness, difficulty focusing for prolonged periods of time, a drop in grades? I think these parents have heard these warning signs for other areas and other concerns. Could be about, just hanging out with the wrong crowd or experimenting with drugs or alcohol. I think these signs that hopefully parents are in tune with, and not just parents, by the way, educators and adults and people, professionals who interact with young people need to really be aware of these signs and know that if those signs, even a couple of those signs, and one of those signs is ever present, it might be time to sit down and to have that conversation. I think following the guidelines that we talked about not being judgmental and listening and just, being very, very supportive, and just a constant reminder that, you're there to help, you're there to listen, you're there to find solutions.
I think another recommendation would be that if you talk to your child about whether they feel embarrassed about recognizing that they might be having a mental health challenge or struggle, again, that stigma is often a barrier to loved ones talking about and speaking about their mental health challenges to their loved ones, and to tell them that that counseling could be very helpful if anybody is going through any kind of struggle, and that's a healthy thing, and that's nothing to be ashamed of either. That it's a very sign of courage and can lead to help with the mental health problem.
As we said earlier, we've been saying all along, it's virtually impossible today to open your phone, to turn on the television. If some of you still read the newspaper, to get to get your news, wherever you get your news from, wherever information comes at you from, virtually impossible for a day to go by for this subject not to come up. I mean, that's really how commonplace it's become in society. And I think the tragic side of that, and I think you'll agree, Dr. Bunt, the tragic side of it is it exists. But the side that we all hold on to some optimism is, and I think, Nancy, as you said this before, is it's being talked about, it's being reported about. I think we've got a long way to go in fighting the stigma and often the shame that people feel in reaching out for help. But we as a society, and certainly professionals in our field, whether you're an educator, whether you're a medical professional, behavioral health professional, we've got to work very hard to continue to tear that stigma away and in many ways normalize these conversations, because they're real, they're important, they existed before the pandemic, and as Dr. Bunt said in his speech, they really were exacerbated throughout the pandemic and have gotten now to alarming rates. And again, as we look at the media, where how do we evidence that this is alarming? Well, look at the number of suicide attempts. Look at the young people going into the hospital for depression, for anxiety, winding up in emergency departments. Look at the fact that's widely reported by every research body who's interested in the subject, that 1 in 4 young people today are diagnosed with the mental health disorder. These numbers are startling and tragic. And again, as I said, so much information comes at us. Rose Beyer, who's a pediatrician in an underserved, poverty-stricken community in Philadelphia, published an article on May 21st in the Philadelphia Inquirer titled, "Will Your Teenager Die Waiting for a Psychiatrist?" We know that part of what compounds this major problem in our country, this major concern, is there is a shortage. There is a shortage. And what I loved about this doctor, who, by the way, is a pediatrician, she says, and Dr. Bunt, I'd love for you to have the final word on this, but she says, yes, of course, it's always preferred for a psychiatrist to delve into mental health with anyone, and certainly young people, and preferred for a psychiatrist, quite frankly, like Dr. Bunt, who has an expertise in working with adolescents and young people. But the reality is there aren't enough. There's a shortage of the supply. So she calls on pediatricians to step up and to try to identify when there are issues, or to be much more in tune during wellness visits with mental health. And I think there are many examples around our country, and certainly here in our own state of New Jersey. We know our Department of Human Services, our Department of Children and Families, the administration, our governor is the chair of the National Governors Association, and he has made this issue his platform, and rightly so, I think. And the same thing goes for the federal administration and the federal government. And thank God the funding has picked up, but it always feels like it's never enough, because the problems, grow and they mount each and every day. So, Dr. Bunt, I'd love to give you kind of the last word on that.
So clearly, a psychiatrist might be needed if there's a very serious mental health disorder diagnosis that requires medication for treatment, effective treatment. However, that's not the first step. And the first step is to connect with professionals, and they might be pediatricians, they might be general practitioners, other doctors. They also might be school teachers, administrators, social workers, healthcare workers of all types and disciplines who are aware of the mental health problems that adolescents are challenged with, and also have judgment in determining whether somebody should be referred to a psychiatrist. And that's the key. You want somebody with good judgment, and there are a lot of professionals in these various disciplines who do have that judgment and can understand that the first step is the connectivity to that individual. To touch on what Nancy was saying, everybody's different. Everybody has different needs and different variables that are challenging them at the moment. And that has to be understood on a very human, personal level. You don't have to be a psychiatrist to do that. Just a very caring person who has enough knowledge and appreciation of mental health disorders to be able to start a conversation.
And
Yes, go ahead, Nancy, please.
sorry, something I just wanted to jump in and say too is I would say one of like the easiest ways to think about mental health. I forget who said this to me. I know someone said it to me. It wasn't for me, it's from somebody else. But probably the easiest way to think about mental health is don't think about it in a mental sense. Put it in the perspective of you broke your leg. What do you do if you break your leg? You know, it's a problem. You can't just walk around with a broken leg. You know, it causes you pain. It's not going to heal right. You have to go see someone about it. And so your first step would be to probably go to your primary doctor, or, you know, ask them about, listen, I did something to my leg. I don't know what to do. And they'll sit down and have a conversation with you and figure out what the best course of action for your broken leg is. And that's as simple as it needs to be. You have to notice something's going wrong. If you realize something's not right, that's when you maybe have the conversation. Okay, I'm not feeling like myself. I'm noticing, these patterns that I don't feel right. I don't feel comfortable. I think I need to go talk to someone about it. And that's as simple as it needs to be.
Thank you very much, Nancy. And Jax, any parting comments for our audience before we sign off?
Sure thing. As Nancy was just elaborating on, one of the really the largest points of connection I think that's important to make nowadays with people in my generation of youth with adults or anyone older is just paying attention, having involvement, having a good listening capacity. Listening is a really important part of understanding what's really going on, and it's an important part of forming a connection of understanding with, whether it's your child, a friend, a protege. Listening and being involved and understanding what someone is going through is a very large part of, taking the steps needed to get someone the proper help. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jack. And I think we all have a responsibility to continue the conversation and to continue to advocate, continue to ensure that our legislators here in New Jersey and across the country continue to make sure that this is on their screen and they're looking at it every day and brainstorming solutions, whether they're funding, regulatory relief. There's so much more we could do as a society. And especially to Nancy and Jax, thanks so much for being leaders. I'm sure that there are dozens of your fellow students at Rowan College of South Jersey that are tuning in, and as Dr. Bunt appropriately referred to both of you as role models, that's real role model-like behavior. And hopefully, maybe you'll make one person more comfortable to talk about some concerns that they might be having as opposed to kind of burying them.